the government will ban access to social media for all children under the age of 16.
Imagine you wake up one day and find out that your children cannot use their favorite social media apps. How would you feel about that? If you do not have a clear answer, you're not alone. We asked 4 different experts and they couldn't come up with a unanimous answer.
I think banning is a good start.
Instead of a carpet banning like the UK or Australia, we should start with educating the parents.
Something they won't stop it, they'll look for a way to hide it better.
Let me back up a minute. Countries around the world have started doing something that was unimaginable a few years ago. They are banning children from social media. Not limiting it, not adding warnings, banning it. Australia did it first. The UK just followed, going further than Australia ever did. And a growing list of countries from France to Indonesia to Malaysia are lining up behind them. So what is actually happening? Why is it happening? Can it even be enforced? And is a ban even the right answer? And should Pakistan follow suit? Let's go through it one by one. What's happening? In December 2025, Australia became the first country in the world to formally bar users under 16 from accessing major social media platforms, targeting 10 major services including YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Reddit, Snapchat, and X. Companies that fail to enforce age verification face fines of up to 50 million Australian dollars. Then, on June 15, Britain followed and went further. The UK's ban will apply to platforms including Snapchat, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and X, though not YouTube Kids or messaging apps like WhatsApp and Signal. Starmer said he hopes the regulations pass by late December, with the ban coming into force by spring 2027. According to The Guardian, the UK is explicitly modelling its policy as Australia Plus. UAE is the latest addition to the growing list of countries that have banned social media for children under 15. Social media platforms have been given a 12-month transition period. France's parliament is moving toward a ban on social media for under 15s, while Denmark, Greece, Spain, and Austria are considering similar measures. Elsewhere, Malaysia and Indonesia have begun restricting children's access to social media, and Canada has introduced legislation proposing its own under 16 ban. This is no longer a fringe policy experiment. It's becoming a global movement. But why are countries doing this? The reason is strikingly consistent across countries, and it sounds personal.
I come to it as a parent myself. I know exactly the fears that we all feel when we're thinking about this issue. You know, all I've ever wanted for my own children, hand on heart, is for them to be happy and for them to be safe. And I think that's what any parent wants. Social media is making children unhappy. It's making it easier for bullies to harass and abuse them. And it could even be harming their mental health.
The scale of the problem is real. Around 80% of Australian children aged 8 to 12 used at least one social media platform in 2024, equivalent to more than 1 million underage users. That number climbs to 95% for teens aged 13 to 15. Asad Beg says the harm itself is not really in dispute anymore.
There is study upon study on how the excessive use of social media can impact the mental health of children and can increase anxiety and other kinds of mental disorder in them. And we've also seen that Mark Zuckerberg himself, for instance, apologized to the parents of young girls who on whose timelines nudity appeared on Instagram. And we've also seen many cases in that regard also, for instance, in the US, where chatbots were kind of involved in terms of harm that ultimately resulted in suicide and so on. So this kind of harm is very well documented.
But behind the legal and political debate is something more specific. What is actually happening inside a developing brain? We put that question to 3 mental health professionals.
What happens is once we're exposed to that constantly, especially excessively, we have what's called a dopamine loop disruption. So constant notifications, like when we're on Instagram or any social media, those trigger short-term reward pathways. So what we call conditional conditioning in psychology, right? Like when you ring a doorbell, so if you have a pet, it will run towards the door. It's the same thing, having triggers such as constant notifications from WhatsApp, TikTok, Instagram, any social media. This creates short-term reward pathways in a child's brain, which also lowers their attention span.
Which is why there's a lot of overstimulation. There is premature exposure. There's exposure to things like violence. There's exposure to ideas like maybe premature exposure to sexuality and ideas of sexuality. There's if we put that aside just for a little while, just the excessive use and the excessive exposure to the lights, the color contrasts that are very, very overly stimulating for children, particularly because everything is developing at the point. What's happening is that because of this overstimulation, there can be a difficulty in terms of the way that they perceive stress, in terms of their attention span, because their focus is already in a developing stage. It is not already developed.
But can this actually be enforced? Here's where it gets complicated. Because Australia, the test case for the entire world, is already showing cracks. A research paper published on ARXIV documented how Australian teenagers actively work around age verification tools. A survey of over 1,000 Australian teens found that more than 60% who had social media accounts before the ban still had access to at least one platform. Teenagers have used printed face masks to fool facial recognition systems, borrowed their parents' identification, and used VPNs to mask their location. Even Meta admits the cracks are real. The company removed over 544,000 suspected under 16 accounts in the first week alone, but warned that a blanket ban simply pushes children to other apps, calling it a whack-a-mole effect. Our experts say the enforcement problem is not just technical, it's behavioral.
Because it's not a generation that is uninformed. You can literally just go on any type of AI and ask them the mechanism of how to overwrite these things, and it will tell you. As simple as that.
Asad Beg goes further, arguing that banning the big platforms gives parents a false sense of safety.
But then there are many other platforms which children use and which could also promote harm. For instance, Roblox is one of them. PUBG is another where the users are allowed to chat, and there have been many cases where predators have been found on platforms like Roblox, for instance, right? Many other gaming platforms allow similar communication between the people who are playing, and many of them are adults and others are children and so on and so forth, right? So in that way, this idea of generally banning something could promote the idea of false security within the parents.
But is banning social media even the right answer? This is where experts are split, and not alongside predictable lines. Social psychologist Jonathan Haidt raised Australian policymakers for freeing kids under 16 from the social media trap. But a significant body of peer-reviewed research disagrees, arguing that the evidence behind blanket bans remains inconclusive. We asked our experts directly, ban or regulate? The answers did not align.
Okay, if you ask me for my personal opinion, I think banning is a good start. Because you see, when you talk about regulations, even if they're really strict regulations, it's very hard to implement them. And children always find access to these things. So I think, and the kind of effects that we are witnessing now, only time will tell how pronounced these effects, adverse effects, would be in 2 decades. But the kind of effects that we are seeing, it is very detrimental, and I would side with banning.
So then banning is not a very practical way to do it, but balancing it with strategies that could help the child accomplish the needs that they are looking for online.
Rather than focusing on the child itself, because you have to look at it from a product producer's point of view as well. A lot of app developers, they know that children are using social media. So most of them would take advantage of the fact that children are naive, or that they will try to do anything that they can to bypass such payment paywalls or anything by utilizing their parents' information. So rather than focusing on the child or creating bans, I would emphasize that parents be very strict with how their children utilize these things.
And there is the Pakistan-specific case Asad Beg makes.
Unlike in the Australia and the UK, we have a very diverse kind of a society where a lot of young people are also making their livelihood from platforms like Facebook and others. In that way, that might not only discourage them, but it also could be counterproductive.
For professionals, multiple verdicts, a ban, a push for parental regulation, a call for balance, and from Asad Beg, a direct warning that what works in Australia or UK may not translate to Pakistan at all. So where does that leave us? to ban or not to ban. Australia banned it. The UK is doubling down on a bigger version of the same ban. The research is split, and even the people who study children's mental health and digital policy for a living cannot fully agree on whether banning, regulating, or educating parents is the actual fix. What is clear is this: the conversation has moved past whether social media affects children. It does. The real fight now is over who gets to decide what happens next.